Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Patricia Bush McManus, the Assistant Vice President for Drexel University Strategic Partnerships. Welcome to Online Learning Council, Town Hall Meeting, Research, and Project Presentation. We're very happy you're here joining us this morning online and in the room to learn about engaging and wonderful scholars on research. Dr. Aldridge sends her welcomes as well as her regrets. She is actually in D.C. doing a keynote speech for the president at a conference. So she does send her regrets that she can't join you guys, but she thanks you for being here this morning. Our first presenter is Dr. Sarumbis, who joined the faculty in 2005 with the College of Nursing and Health Professions after 29 years of experience in critical care nursing practice and 15 years in nursing education. She currently teaches several courses in the advanced role graduate programs and has previously held several nursing positions in the University of California, Los Angeles, and also as the University of Southern California in Southern California. So thank you all. Welcome, Dr. Sarumbis.
Well, thank you, all of you, for being able to come so early this morning. I wanted to talk about using course analytics to measure online MSN student engagement and outcomes. This is research that I completed with Dr. Pat Riccio, who is out in California and hopefully still in bed. But at any rate, this was a topic that really became of interest to us because we wanted to look at student engagement in our courses. And when we look to the nursing literature, I will tell you there is nothing on any type of course analytics in any of the nursing courses. And there is some, of course, that you can find in the general education literature and higher education. There we go. Okay, so again, one of the reasons that sparked us is there has been, and I will, of course, this will be no surprise to any of you, while in nursing, we're having a burgeoning increase in online enrollment, not only at Drexel, but every college in the area throughout the country are really getting onto this, particularly for our graduate nursing students. Similarly, there's a burgeoning increase in online enrollment for all types of majors, not just nursing. But the American Association of Colleges of Nursing really noted this increase in online enrollment. However, in general higher education, what was noted was with online learning, there is increased attrition and decreased graduation rates. Now, how does this hit us in nursing? Well, the issue is we have a very big shortage in nursing faculty. So we really have to think about how are people getting their masters and then their doctorates in nursing or nursing education. Also, there's a shortage of nurse practitioners. And so we have to think of those, and nurse anesthetists, those at the front line of care as well. So this is of particular interest to our specialty. It is also interesting, though, that there's been research really conducted in this area that says that there is increased attrition in online when you compare it to face-to-face classes. And some of the reason for this, they believe, is the fact that there's less engagement. Students have this feeling that they're in a silo and that they're really separated from other students and from other faculty. And so, of course, it really behooves us then to try to increase engagement and to make our classes online really feel like students are attending a class in a classroom, if you will, that they have that kind of connectiveness to other students and also to the faculty. So we'd like to think of our courses as being online communities, if you will. And in a study by Lundberg and Sheraton in I'm realizing, pardon me, that up there is not matching what I have. I'm sorry, excuse me for 1 second.
Oh, it's stuck. Seems to be stuck. Oh, did it hit it? I think,
Backwards,
oh,
back by 1.
something seems to be stuck. Should get it.
Hold on for just 1 second. But anyway, as we thought about developing online communities, I want to make sure I stay close to the mic for those folks that are in. Yes, for our digital cyberspace. But at any rate, as we began to think about, Lumberg really did some work in this particular area and looked at the fact that the more engaged students were, the more likely they would remain enrolled in a particular program. And so when we looked at this research, our particular purpose was to examine the associations between engagement and also the outcomes that we were finding in our courses in the MSN program. And we looked to the learning management system.
Is that okay?
How are we doing? Okay, yeah, I can go to that.
Okay. Let's use
What should I do? See if that goes?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So when we really wanted to frame our study, we looked to the work of Alexander Aston. His work dates back to 1975, and he did a series of different research studies where he looked at what he termed involvement. Now, his studies were actually conducted on students that were in an in-class traditional environment. And he looked at the input, such as the entry-level GPA, majors selected by the student, and then he looked at what he called environment. Later he changed this to resources. The environment for him was how engaged students were with any type of activities on the campus, because he felt that the more, and what his studies show, was that the more involved they were with activities on campus and with their schoolwork, the higher the academic success. And so the output then was course grades. What we did is we used this model and used it for online by looking at resources actually as being, well, geez, how involved are our students? If we look at course analytics, we can then look at the course access, interactions, submissions, and minutes. Now, I will tell you that the term involvement was changed later. You have the work of Kuh, K-U-H, and in 2010. And Kuh then began to talk about engagement in coursework. And then later Cook in 2016 talked about engagement in online learning and really said to faculty, you know, the first thing that you need to do is to really set up your courses so that they have engagement if you want any type of success in your courses. So he kind of gave that edict based on the research that he did. Now, in looking at the course analytics, of course you can go into your Blackboard course shell. You can click on, when you go into under course tools if you're using the Blackboard LMS, and click on course analytics. And what we did was we had an honest broker who downloaded that information. I'll go into more of that with the data analysis. And the course analytics, we look at accesses, which is the number of times or clicks the student accesses the course. Now, I want you to think about this because we're going to look at accesses and submissions, accesses and minutes later, because some people will tell you, well, geez, you know, the course analytics and a learning management system may not be all that accurate, but I'm going to beg to differ because what our research showed was actually two of these particular items that I have listed here really were quite telling. And I think I know, or I'm going to at least propose, why accesses and perhaps minutes are not so telling. The minutes is the total number of minutes spent within Blackboard. Now, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if you've ever had this happen. I've actually had, once in a while, a student say to me, do you watch to see how long we're in the course shell? And I'm thinking, aha, the little devil. Because what they think is if I go in and I just, keep the shell open, then it'll look like I'm really connected with the course, correct? Somebody knows the secret behind the curtain if I think of the Wizard of Oz. However, it's really, what I will demonstrate to you is that really it's the interactions and submissions. So the interactions are the total number of clicks on content items, tools and assessments within that Blackboard LMS. And the submissions is the total number of times a student has submitted work through the Blackboard site. Now this can include assignments, if you have any kind of test in there, discussion board post, journal entries, anything like that. It will actually look at those particular submissions. And so in a little bit, I will tell you what we found related to that. Now, our research method was a retrospective correlational design. We actually did this study 2 years ago. It takes a long time to get something published, and and it was actually just published this month. I have, of course, a large private urban university hosting an online MSN program. What we did is we had one of the academic advisors as an honest broker. And that individual took the data down. Our fall term has the largest enrollment, of any term, and downloaded the Blackboard data for all of the sections of a health policy and politics course, and also for the first in a two-part research methods course. And downloaded all of that, also connected that with the student grade, student specialty. Now the student specialty would be nurse anesthesia, nurse practitioner, or what we would call advanced role, which could be nursing leadership, nursing education, clinical trials, as an example. And so we had a total of 360 students when all was said and done. And we also looked at what was their entry-level GPA, as well as their specialty, and then what was their course grade at the end as the outcome. Now, for the data analysis, we did do a descriptive analysis and included mean, standard deviations, contingency tables, proportions for categorical data. I will tell you that the average final course grade for our learners ended up being about 91. The range was a 33 all the way up to 100. I will tell you also that the mean age of our master's level students, and this will really come into play in a few minutes, the mean age is around 32.7, if you will. We did a Pearson product moment correlation. We also then did a Spearman's coefficient just to recheck that Pearson product moment correlation. And these were produced to assess the relationship between the input variables and the output variable. Then an ANOVA was conducted to assess the impact of the categorical predictor for the variables on grade. Then a backwards elimination within a multiple linear regression analysis. I hope this isn't too much for this morning. I have not had caffeine. I don't know about the rest of you. And this was used to produce a model that only included the variables that significantly, predicted a grade at the alpha 0.05 level. And then we did a non-parametric Kruskal-Wallis test, to confirm the results of the ANOVA. There we go. Okay, so for the results, here's what we found. I hinted at this, interactions and submissions had the highest impact on the final outcomes of the course grade. And I really felt that this was interesting. I don't think that we can look at minutes, and I'm placing my own bias here, because I told you about the couple of students that will ask about the minutes, just sitting there inside the course shell. So I can see why that wasn't of particular help to us. I do see that clicking on various things, because think about it, some of your students may decide to just download articles, download everything they need, PowerPoints, whatever, and look at them and study them as well as a textbook outside of the course. But what was also found were the submissions. So this is very interesting because there have been other studies which have actually looked at this. Again, only a few. But they've looked at, okay, people that were engaged highly in a discussion board, for instance, because it would count those submissions, they tended to have the higher grades. And so submissions at all. Those folks that are really submitting a paper, and maybe it's a draft and another draft and another draft, but geez, they're really working at it, aren't they? And then if you have any kind of self-test in your course, that type of thing, isn't it the more active student in the course that will say, geez, I know this isn't for a grade, but I want to see my comprehension of the content, who will actually go to that? So we did find that both of those were really the highest impact on our final grade and our success of our learners. Now here's something interesting. The others are really impactful and interesting. For every 1 point increase in the entry level GPA, the expected course outcome grade increased by 1.93%. Now, I had previously in my doctoral work really studied GPA and undergraduate nursing students. And what we found was something that I'm similarly going to say that some research has also shown for graduate nursing students. And I dare say, I've also looked at it for college students in general. And their GPA coming into the program, I always remember a doctoral professor that I had, and also the research bears out, that your previous work is very predictive of the work that you're going to do in the future, you know. And so this was very true as well for us. For every 1 year increase in age, now this is extremely interesting, the expected course outcome grade decreased by 0.17%. The only other study that we could find was a study on nurse anesthesia program that stated that they found the same thing. Maybe it's just not been looked at, but I think it's really interesting. Now, again, I told you the mean age is about 32.7, 33 years of age for our students. So if you think of every year after that, what could be the impact? Maybe there's something we need to do ahead of time when we bring them into the program to give extra assistance. So I really felt that that was interesting. Also, for every 1 additional increase in submissions, the expected course outcome grade increased. Shoot my phone. I apologize. For every one, for every 1 additional increase, I feel like one of my students, you know. For every 1 additional increase in submissions, the expected course outcome grade increased by 0.33%. Really kind of interesting, telling us how involved, if you will, or engaged the student is, showing that academic success. Now, we didn't find in our study any significant relationship between grades across the demographic variables of either major, race, gender, or geography. I will just say that one of the nurse anesthesia programs did find that students who were unsuccessful were more likely to be male than female. One study, not found in our study. But still kind of interesting. So I think what we decided to do then was to say, okay, how did this information really inform what we were going to do for the upcoming year? But before I get there, limitations of our study. Now, the data, of course, it was 360 some students. It was collected from 2 online nursing graduate courses in one college of nursing over a period of 1 term. Okay, so, you know, that's a limitation in of itself. And also, the generalizability of those findings related to program engagement may also be, there could be a difference between the 2 courses, you know, or the way that the faculty member decided to teach that course. Now, as far as the course outcomes that I was talking about, we decided to use this, and I would suggest that everyone really take a look at these for continuing quality course improvements, because you can really, I feel, base them on the course analytics. I feel it's really an untouched database for you. And given the results, what we did was we sought to really increase and enhance our engagement in the courses. So here's what we did. Faculty in the Health Policy and Politics course decided to have what was called writers' workshops. Now, you have to know a little something about the course. It's a writing intensive course. It's the first course that our Masters in Nursing students take. Nursing does not, in the undergraduate world, focus on writing. Okay, we focus more on getting it right, safe, efficient, patient care. In the undergraduate world. So when they come to us, some of them are not the best writers. So what I would do is I would say, send, and you can tell who teaches the Health Policy and Politics course, right? Send me your paper at least within an hour. I don't look at them ahead of time. An hour at least before we have these workshops. And come in, you give me 5 minutes, okay, and I will review your paper. And you have to dispense with confidentiality because I will do this in front of anybody that comes into the room. I will tell you, they all come into the room during that time, and I see some taking notes. They're hearing what I'm saying to the students, because I'll start out first by talking about writing style, and then next we'll go into APA formatting. And I do this for each student. I will tell you, I found that, and that's for a whole nother piece of research to bring here, but the grades actually improved over the course of doing that. But here's something for faculty. I didn't realize this, but what it actually did was it decreased time I spent on grading. Do you know how you're grading like paper and you feel like, oh gosh, I keep saying this and the same? And we have up to 25 students, and you can have up to 2 sections of this. So after 50 papers, you feel like you're just about done. But I felt like I didn't have to make those same comments. Why? Because they heard me say them. And the course evaluations have really been superb. And students will write back to me, a couple of them have, in future courses say, you know what, you really helped me. And this really helped to improve my writing for the future. So I really do feel that increased engagement, we're going to go back and look at that. Now, the other faculty member for the research courses, what she did was she started including one-to-one meetings. Students could either meet with her by phone, or they could meet with her, again, using Zoom, a web conferencing site that we have access to. And what they would do is they could go over their research study critique with her and get one-on-one, information. And so we're going to take a look at that. We feel from the feedback that we're getting from students, at least they're more satisfied. We feel that they're more engaged, but we're going to go back and take a look at those course analytics again, since we've allowed the dust to settle and we've been doing this for a good year. And so I do want to thank you. I will take your questions. There was one other thing that I added. I talked about that article. It just got published in the Journal of Nursing Education, and that is the access to that article. So anyone have any questions for me? Yes, Deirdre.
Well, my first thought, just thank you so that people
Ah,
online.
thank you.
My first thought is about submissions, and specifically interactivity on the discussion board, and whether faculty responses, other student responses to the student posts were tracked in some way. Because posting, of course, is incredibly important, but having feedback and posting again and having a conversation is a different kind of interactivity. So I wonder if you had thoughts on that, tracking on that, numbers.
We don't have tracking on that because the other course, the faculty member really doesn't get involved into the discussion board. It's really between students. However, I have a different philosophy. It's just a different philosophy, and so I do get involved. The discussion boards that I have open up on a Monday. I wait till late Wednesday, Thursday to get involved because I find that if I get involved too early, it shuts down the conversation. Mostly what I try to do is engage them into thinking about something a little differently, or to kind of change the conversation, or to also provide my own feedback. Also, I use discussion boards for other instances as well in other courses. So I may use them for students to share their work and for them to critique one another's work. You know, I find that that really helps them to engage. I'm hoping that answered your question, Deirdre. Okay, thanks. And I think there was a question over here, but we'll wait for, oh, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Hi, thanks for a really interesting presentation. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts to using analytics to identify students early who might need a nudge, either possibly even automatically from the system, or that would be flagged for you to contact. But some way, what I find, particularly with online, is I find, 2 or 3 weeks later, too late really, that the student hasn't been doing things, hasn't been participating. I just wonder if there's a way to use the system, if you've thought about a way to use the system to develop a timely nudge for students who are drifting.
That's an excellent point. So the point being having more of a timely nudge for students using the course analytics. We don't use the submissions, et cetera, in that way. I know that I haven't. What I will do is I will go in and see last point of access and then see if they have submitted to a discussion board, which I usually like to have something by the second week that students are graded on in our 10-week program. So I do it in that particular manner, but you bring up a very good point, and there are articles, again, in the general higher education literature that talk about using it as a warning system. I wish there was something that could be a red light, green light, with it. Well, there is. It's either red or green.
But I think you can set the system in the retention center, right? In the student.
Oh, that's right.
You can set that up. It's just as a fact member, you go in and you would know by the way that the course is set up where your students start to fall off. And so you've had that experience in the past, right? So you can see, oh, I know Joe and Jim started falling off here in week 2 because they were late on X and so assignment. So you go into the retention center for future sessions and set that so that when you go in there, you can look and be able to see your student activity or interactivity and see what it's level you want it to be, and then send a message from the retention center to that particular student. You're talking about automated systems though, where the automated system sets a warning if students dip below such and so. Those don't always work because if you have a course that does have a natural ebb and flow, which may be something that you want, the system would automatically send them messages that they weren't engaged enough when they really were, based on what the course was delivering to them. So that's the issue with the automated systems, but you can set them up in line.
Now, I believe I want to share with the online audience what Dana was saying to us is, where am I? It's under where in course? Retention Center, thank you. In course analytics. You can tell I don't use it, can't you? In the Retention Center, because I don't trust it, I think. The Retention Center, you can set it so it will tell you whether the student has been active in the course, et cetera. I've had some issues with that, so I think that that's why I haven't used it. And I tend to do one of these, going into the course myself and really seeing their activity. There are automated systems as well, Okay. Thank you, Dana, for sharing that.
Yeah, hi. I had actually a couple more methodological questions, which I'm sure are answered in the paper itself. But when you said that interactions and submissions had the highest impact, was that based on the backwards elimination regression?
Yes.
Okay. So then, did you compare those impacts based on the regular coefficients or the standardized? And was it a significant difference or an observed difference?
God bless you. I am not able to say.
Okay.
I'm going to be honest with you. We had a statistician actually do this and then go over it with us.
Okay.
So I cannot speak
Well, I'm sure it's in the paper.
to exactly what
Right.
was done. I don't know that it's down to that level of specificity.
Okay, well, yeah, well, I mean, I know most people don't usually do like significance testing on standardized coefficient because it's annoying and it's usually just good enough to look at the observed at that point. But then my other question was, so you were talking about the GPA
Right.
and how it's a really big predictor, and it kind of makes logical sense, and I agree, like if you've done well before, you would do well again. Did you guys think about any possible third variables that may have impacted that? Because I was thinking about, looking far back in a student's lifetime, like, the earliest recordings of their GPA might not necessarily be wholly due to ability. So, like, I wonder, is there a possible third variable early on in the career of a student that might pigeonhole them to a lower academic track? If GPA is a predictor, like, could it be based on something else other than necessarily academic ability?
That, we didn't look at that. All we looked at was their GPA on entrance, so it was their undergraduate GPA.
Right.
Certainly, folks, we all know people that have also had low undergraduate GPAs and yet have been successful in graduate school. Research all over the place, will demonstrate that that is kind of the rare bird, if you will, and not usual.
Right.
Yeah. But we don't have anything else in our study where we looked at anything other, if that's what you're
Right.
asking.
Yeah, I was just
Right.
wondering if you ever thought, like in a follow-up, or if you knew of anyone who was looking at GPA. I know with the analytics in Blackboard, you're not necessarily privy to that kind of information, but I was curious if you considered it as like a possible confound in either your study or just the literature in general.
Well, we did look at GPA on entrance
Right.
into the program. That was part of that was one of the variables.
Right, I guess I'm talking about more about the factors that went into GPA, like possibly that GPA might not be the best representation of academic ability, and that so what I'm saying is you observed this phenomenon that GPA predicts better GPA in the future, which I think could possibly hold true even in a situation where student A has a really good GPA and they're from a very wealthy family. Student B has a worse GPA but has the same innate physical capabilities as student A, but their accessibility is limited. So they continue to underperform because the GPA is predictive of underperformance, but it's not necessarily an indication of their inability to handle.
Right, and that wasn't the question that we were
Right.
asking. So that wasn't part of the study. Whether it would be part of anything that we would look at in the future, I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I will tell you that an interesting thing did come up in one of the other studies. That was a nurse anesthesia study, and I felt it was interesting because it was something I looked at in my doctoral work, and that was the science GPA in undergrad, and they found that that was even more predictive of how, now we're looking at nursing, okay? Right. So you would hope science, would be a big factor, but they looked at their science GPA and found that that was even more predictive of the success of their nurse anesthesia students.
I guess your findings just got me thinking about the validity
Right.
of GPA as a predictor in general.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. So, when you started discussing the study in the beginning, and you're looking at somewhat of a comparison between traditional learning, in-class learning, and virtual learning, and you're starting to look at, I guess, kind of compare the dynamics between in-class learning versus online learning. Has the study kind of taken a look at some of the dynamics of the in-house learning? For example, when you talk about interaction and submissions, okay, and you're talking about maybe how often someone submits, the quality of what they submit, and maybe the response of professors, being able to, that immediate response being an indicator of how someone really does ultimately, because there are certain dynamics. If you're sitting in class and you walk in the classroom and you have friends that are there and people you're familiar with, your tendency to maybe interact more actively might be influenced by that. The fact that you speak to a professor and they give you an answer right away, or they acknowledge something that you're saying might impact how you ultimately do in that class. Has there been any look at those type of dynamics as relates to interaction and submission in terms of how those things might play out in a virtual environment that might influence maybe a professor being more favorable on a grade because you're timely and you're often in terms of your response, those types of things?
Right. We didn't break down the interactions and submissions as to the quality. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, the level of responsiveness to and fro by the student and the professor and other classmates in a virtual environment,
Right.
and how that influences the outcome, not only the performance, but the response to that interaction in terms of how a professor might grade, as compared to being in classroom where you have that immediate feedback, and of course that influence is there.
The way I can respond to that, I understand what you're saying by the classroom. I used to always say that just because you were present didn't mean learning was taking place, right? We all know how that happens. And so in the classroom, you can certainly have someone, I call it taking up air and space, and learning is not happening. In the online environment, certainly you need to look at the quality. I think the quality is measured at the end with the course grade. Okay, and taking a look at that. So in other words, the quality of their submissions was really the course grade, the output that we had. And so not really looking specifically at, I guess, a more qualitative look at how we felt about the discussion boards, et cetera. I will tell you there is also another study that was done with nurse practitioners as nursing students, and what they found was actually the more discussion board submissions, the higher the end course grade was. And again, not looking at the quality of it, but looking at the end result being the course grade, which would include whatever tests they had, discussion board posts, et cetera. But it's just that idea of being involved in the course, being engaged in the course. And is that more or less the personality of the student that succeeds in the end? So you bring up some interesting points. I'm hoping I answered your question.
Yeah, and I think the other dynamic is when you start to look at age correlations. If someone that's younger that maybe is more tech savvy, more apt to say, I'll respond more often because this is something that I do regularly because that's my mode of communication typically. Or if you have an older student and say, I'll do this when necessary because I'm not on the computer that often, and those types of things. Does that volume by someone that's younger tend to influence their grade positively more than maybe an older student that don't have those same tendencies, although their capabilities may be equal?
Yeah, I think the idea that we found that there was an issue, with age was really very interesting. That was also something that was found in a couple other studies. And so what can we do to the 40-year-old, 50-year-old students? We've also had 60-year-old students in our nursing education master's program. And what can we do for them when they come in? Is it the issue that they're not digital natives? We don't know. But what we have done is try to put in things such as the online course for beginning people in using Blackboard to assist them. But we're finding at the other end, sometimes we have to assist those students in the online class with technical issues and things like that. Whether that may be a drag on how they're doing, scholastically, we don't know. It hasn't really been looked at. But it really is something that needs to be looked at, and looking at how can we engage those older students and how can we help them to be successful. Yes.
I want to thank you again for your presentation and finding the qualitative and quantitative data that goes towards student success in those courses. It mentions in your presentation about how it led to decreased attrition. Can you give us any statistics that led to or identified what that attrition was and what it ended up being as a result?
We didn't specifically just yet look at attrition. as being an outcome of our study. Okay, that is something that going forward, I think that we'd like to take a look at. As I've increased enhancements in that health policy and politics course that I was talking about, I have each year monitored attrition, and it has decreased. I can't give you numbers. This is just something that I've been tracking over time. Yes, but thank you.
Sorry, another question. Have you considered with your collaborator transparency in terms of telling students at the beginning, this is what our research is indicating, that the more engaged you are, the more successful you will be, or adding that to the CNHP, success in online learning for the master's students course, something like that, so that there is even greater common vocabulary about what will lead to success in the online environment?
Let me make sure, Deirdre, that I have your question correct. Are you asking, do we tell students ahead of time what we're able to see in the course analytics and how we know that students that are more involved and what that means?
Well, now that
how
you
they're
have,
more successful.
as of this month, now that you have a journal article, can you say, listen, we've been doing some research,
Right.
and this tends to increase student success?
That is an interesting point and something that I think we will share. What I have shared with them in the past, I did do also research on those writers' workshops that I was telling you about. And what I do share with them each time is students that have been involved with the writers' workshops, their grades on their paper are infinitely much better. Kind of interesting, though, we find, and this is just my feeling tone, and there are a number of faculty who agree with me, we got our best students in the fall term. They are in that introduction discussion board before I enter the discussion board, meaning before the course has opened. Okay, so they go in, you know how we have that preview week? They're in there introducing themselves. They're in there getting involved with the work. So it's really interesting. Now, my students in the winter term, please come to the writer's workshop. It will, students in the past, infinitely. I had so many less students in the writer's workshops. It was really disappointing. So advertising that, but I think you're right, Deirdre. I think it's important to at least let them know, this is what our research shows, and this is how you can be successful. Yes. Are there any? Yes.
So were you able to get any more analytics from any of the other third-party products that are in Blackboard? For example, Drexel Streams, in terms of how often students were watching the videos, how long they were watching the videos, whether how much time they were spending with the lecture videos impacted for practice, for example, whether we were able to pinpoint not only whether they were interacting in Blackboard, but what types of interaction and how much time they were spending with all the other products that Blackboard was offering?
If you use Drexel Streams or Kaltura, it will count that. If you use an outside vendor, it will not count the video time, is my understanding. At least as of the time where we did the study, which was 2 years ago. That's a good question.
Are there any online questions?
Okay. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So our next presenter is also from the College of Nursing and Health Professions. This is Dr. Jane Green Ryan. She's Associate Professor. Dr. Ryan's practiced as a certified nurse midwife for 13 years. Her clinical practice was focused on providing care for vulnerable groups and underserved urban women and their families, which was the focus of her PhD research. She has gone to become involved in a number of global health projects, most recently and intensively in northern India, where she is part of Drexel's faculty team, working in partnerships with the College of Nursing there in the Himalayas. Here to share her research on teaching globally, global classroom, Global Connectivity, please welcome Dr. Jane Green Ryan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Small correction, my PhD research was actually on nurse migration, no, that's cool, that's cool. So it was actually on migration, which led me to a whole body of global work, which is what I continue to do since. Okay. We'll get there. All right. And it's, yep, okay. Thank you very much, Patricia, for that lovely introduction. I have a joint appointment actually as associate professor at CNHP and then a visiting professor at Eternal University. I wish I had pictures of how far away and remote it is and what is involved in getting there. I've embedded pictures throughout this presentation where I could, when it seemed like they were actually relevant to what I was talking about. So some of the pictures are perfect and some of them, they match up the best that we can. My research, our work, the work of our team is very generously funded through Eternal University, our partners in India, CNHP, and the Office of Global Engagement. So, and our data analysis, not at all the same level of Dr. Srimbas, that was really phenomenal. Ours is much more simple, more simplistic, and I'll share what I've got. So an overview of our presentation, I'm going to take you on a brief tour, give you a brief look of our academic partners in India, some of the different kinds of initiatives that we have going on there. We have quite a bit. Their faculty development, I'll talk about that a tiny bit. Educational initiatives, which is what I'm really going to be focusing on today. We're doing a research project. Within the educational initiatives, although we're doing many different kinds of things, today I'm really going to be talking about global classrooms, both an overview of the theory of global classrooms, how it's implemented, how CNHP has adopted it, how our particular group has adopted it even further, and then look at outcome data of global classrooms between students in India and CNHP, all online students, lessons learned, next steps, and a very brief synopsis. This whole presentation is going to be, to the best of my ability, quick and fast. I can talk about India and the work that we're doing there for about 20 hours, nonstop. So we have a 10-year collaboration with Eternal University in Baru Sahib, Himachal Pradesh, India, which, as I said, is extremely remote. It's 10 hours, so the flight between Newark and Delhi used to be about 12 hours. Now it's gotten longer. There are another 3 hours because of some issues that are going on between Pakistan and India. Typically, those flights coming from the US to Delhi fly over the Pakistan-Afghanistan airspace, a little bit of the Soviet Union, but mostly over Pakistan, Afghanistan. And because of the conflicts between Pakistan and India, that airspace has been closed down, so which has added 3 hours to the flights, meaning that now the flights go in through the southern route, which adds a good bit of time. So it's remote. Even getting to Delhi is quite a hike. And then from Delhi up into the Himalayas where we work is another 10 hours. The roads start out being pretty good. I wish I had pictures of it. It's so interesting. You'll be driving on a main highway. Think about going from Philadelphia to New York. That's kind of like what it's going to be like for the first part of the trip, only rather than just having cars, you have scooters, you have buses, you have horse-drawn carriages, you have like everything doing all kinds of stuff. And the idea of lines in a road are very loosely attended to. So and those are the good roads. And then you start getting up into the mountains where the roads it's very rural and very remote. The roads become smaller and smaller, and I find it more and more beautiful. But it involves a big commitment from our faculty and our faculty team. I'm very grateful to those who are willing to go with me on these journeys. So our partners, it's a Sikh, a faith-based university. in far northern India, the northeast corner. They have, it's a big school. It's an internationally accredited school, K through 12 residential programs for little kids up through high school. And then women's colleges. It used to be both men's and women's colleges, and then several years ago, the Sikhs have a very strong commitment. I don't know if you know to what extent people in the room know about women's education in many parts of the world, but in many parts of the East, education of women and girls is not as highly valued. So there's big gender gaps between who gets educated and what kinds of things they can study. The Sikhs do not buy into that at all. They strongly endorse education for women and girls. So several years ago, they really decided to make a focus on educating. So K through 12 is both genders, and then for the college, it's just women. And both undergraduate as well as graduate programs, education, engineering, public health, and nursing. So as I said, we have multiple collaborations. We have student-faculty exchange. To some extent, we're trying to grow that program. We go over there, we're trying to bring people back here with us. We're working on that one. We have community-based research, that would be a whole separate topic. And then we have educational initiatives of various kinds. We have undergraduate initiatives where we take over nursing faculty and align the nursing faculty's clinical expertise with teaching the undergraduate nurses in India. Similarly with graduate faculty, so graduate clinical faculty teaching the graduate nursing students. And sorry for a little bit of language here. A call, sometimes you'll see that I put in a college. A call just means the College of Nursing. So it's like saying Drexel, which is Eternal University. So sometimes I say Eternal, sometimes I say a call. It'd be like Drexel or CNHP. So forgive me, sometimes I just like get those, forgive me. So within the graduate programs, the College of Nursing at Eternal University, College of Nursing, has the graduate students are divided up into first year and second year. They're called PG1, post-graduation, bachelor's degree, PG1 and PG2. So within the PG1 and PG2, it's with that group of students that I'm doing community health research, community-based research, and then teaching these global health courses. We also have faculty development. Faculty development most definitely goes in both directions. Even though it's our faculty going there, let me tell you, we learn as much from them as we might think that we're possibly sharing with them. I have learned more from the time that I've spent there than I can even begin to tell you. And then we have global classrooms. And our global classroom started several years ago based on a workshop that I went to that was offered by Drexel through the Office of International Programs, talking about global classrooms. Anybody in the room done global classrooms? Taught global classrooms? Oh my God, they're so much fun. You should, Adam Zahn, a shout out to the Office of International Programs, has, and I'll give a brief overview of kind of how they work, but we've tweaked them quite a bit. But if you're interested in global engagement, please strongly consider. I can't do enough of a sales job for him of the work that his office is doing, and the opportunity to engage with faculty across the world just has strongly influenced the way I teach. So within CNHP, we offer different kinds of global classrooms. We offer it across the curriculum, both Drexel undergraduates who are face-to-face. So within CNHP, we have different kinds of undergraduate programs. We have face-to-face classes for people who are becoming nurses, as well as exclusively online classes for people who are nurses with an associate's degree who want to get a bachelor's. And it's within that program that I mostly teach. So for our traditional undergraduates, we've paired up India undergraduates with Drexel undergraduates through a course called Relationship-Based Care. And then this is where most of what I'm going to be talking about is going on, because it's the work that I'm doing. I'm only sharing with you my work, not other people's teaching. So it's a call, their nursing students paired up with our undergraduates who are in an exclusively online program. I stuck this picture in. This is one of our faculty members, Jill Durstein, who was the one who started this whole program, just to give you an idea of what their classes look like. That's kind of their typical undergraduate classroom. What you can't see is here, where I'm standing, is a window that looks out onto the mountains, and they're often like monkeys playing out in the mountains right below, or jumping up into the window. Pretend, this window looks out into the mountains. Sorry, this window looks out into the mountains, and because it's open, the monkeys will just come right in, which I find quite amusing, but it's actually kind of dangerous because monkey bites are not a good thing. So for today's presentation, I'm really going to be focusing on global classrooms, and particularly the second clustering of students in India, graduate students in India, learning in a face-to-face environment with myself, which I'll explain in a little bit, along with students, my own students, who are learning in an online environment. So they're taking the same 2 courses. So when I go to India, and I go twice a year for about 6 weeks at a time, any course that I'm teaching here will also be offered as a global classroom. So these are my 2 courses. I'm the chair of these 2 courses, Transformational Leadership and Population Health. When I'm in India, I'm teaching them face-to-face with the graduate students in the room. The graduate students in the room have the same access to the course shell as my online students. We'll get to that in a second. So the model of global classrooms, the way Drexel runs global classrooms, typically is it's Drexel faculty at Drexel partnered with a faculty member at another place, and there are lots of different kinds of Drexel global classrooms going on. So perhaps a faculty in Philadelphia and a faculty in Germany meet someplace, say at a conference, where maybe they're in the same discipline, maybe they're not. So maybe we both teach leadership. I teach nursing leadership. Patricia teaches business leadership. She lives and teaches in Germany. I live and teach in Philadelphia. But we say, hey, guess what? You know what? There are a lot of things that my nursing students need to understand about the business of healthcare or business leadership. And a lot of the principles are going to be overlapping. Why don't we see whether or not 2 different faculty, 2 different places can put our students into some kind of collaborative classroom. I'm running my class, Patricia's running her class. I have my class objectives, she has her class objectives, her course objectives. Maybe some of them overlap. I remain responsible for grading my students. Patricia remains responsible for grading her students, but the students learn and work together. It's really so much fun. I can't even tell you. And Drexel as a whole is very heavily engaged and very willing to support faculty who are willing to step out a little bit and try doing something like this, including sending faculty and students from Drexel to a conference where, let's just go back to Patricia in Germany for a second. Patricia finds that there's a conference in London, which is a perfect venue for the things that we've been learning and studying. Drexel will strongly support Drexel faculty and students going to this conference where they can then meet up face-to-face with the students from the other university. So that's kind of the typical way global classrooms run. We've adapted it a little bit. The relationship-based care, the class it was for our usual undergraduates, was run that way. We've run it 2 different ways, but it was run that way, where we had a faculty member in India who was teaching his students in India about relationship-based care, where our faculty member in Philadelphia was teaching relationship-based care, so pieces of the course, and then they would meet virtually in an online webinar, Skype-like session. I think they used Zoom. So they had online together meetings as well as discussion boards and other assignments that they did separately. So that's what I call the usual method of global classrooms. The way that I've adapted it is because I have this opportunity to go to India to teach twice a year. I do it slightly differently. I just described that a little bit. When I'm in the room with my graduate students face to face, they all have access to the same course. And this is just kind of in general the way the courses are set up. So my students in India have complete access to the Drexel course shell, the activities, like everything that's going on within that particular course. And they're enrolled in both courses. They don't obviously get credit and they don't get a grade. But when I'm in India with them, when I'm teaching them, and we do long seminars, long day seminars, they'll get bored with, I'm there to teach them research. They get like real bored talking about research pretty darn quick. And I'll just go, hey, guess what? Let's mix it up. Let's go learn about something about transformational leadership. Or let's watch, I have movies embedded within my course. Let's watch a movie. We watched Philadelphia. Do you guys remember the movie Philadelphia about HIV/AIDS? Deals with lots of different things. So we watched the movie Philadelphia. They loved it because they got to see what Philadelphia was like, but it also sparked a lot of questions about race and gender and assumptions and different kinds, all of the complex social dynamics that came up in the course of that movie. So I think this pretty much defines it. All of my modules are chunked into 2-week sections, an active week where the students are engaged with something, websites, articles, podcasts, TED Talks, discussion boards, whatever it is, and then a quiet, reflective week during which they're like thinking about and working on an assignment that reflects the work of whatever the concept was for that first module. It's all, my classes are inquiry-based, meaning that students are actively asked to, within this large concept, what is it that you want to learn more about, and then they go after that and they learn about that in depth. Okay, so this is a picture of some of my graduate students in India. In order to try to get the students to connect, I've used different things. Zoom classroom, Zoom sessions, as you'll hear in a minute from my students from Drexel, say, well, the time difference, and there is quite a big time difference, the time difference is a problem, and it is. So my students in India, this is an evening session for my students in India. It's between 5:30 and 6:30 in India. It's between 8 and 9 in the US. So my students in the US would love it if I could have an evening session with them, but that would be 3 o'clock in the morning for my students in India, and I couldn't actually get anybody to buy in to do that with me. So I would have evening collaborate sessions with them, but I couldn't get any of my Indian students to come with me. So because it's a large cohort of graduate students in India, all in the same classroom, some of whom are first years, the majority of whom are second years, it already starts out being a little bit complex, and there are a lot of them. At any given year, it's between 30 to 45. So when I thought about how to break the students into small enough groups where they would be able to discuss openly with each other, I decided to do it by clinical areas, because everybody, all the students I'm talking about are all practicing nurses. My Drexel students have a clinical practice of some kind. They're registered nurses getting a baccalaureate degree. In India, they're practicing nurses coming in for a graduate student. So in some ways, they're the same. They're a little bit different. CNHP are the Drexel students exclusively online. Eternal University, face-to-face graduate students. They meet, when I'm there with, they meet. They have seminars. I have them for 3 hours, but they're in class from 8 in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. So this picture, when they're coming to meet with the students, is after they've already been in class for 8 hours. They're like phenomenal students. I'm there primarily to teach them graduate research, but then also teach them other things, particularly the global classrooms of leadership and population health. So in many ways, they are more alike than they're different in terms of their adult practicing clinicians with the same kind of complicated family lives that many graduate students come to us with. They do, as I said, many of the same assignments. So the Office of International Programs very generously gave me a book called Curious Incident of a Dog in the Nighttime. Have you guys read it? It's a fabulous book written from the viewpoint of a guy with autism that I took over with me, so the students online would be reading the same book that the students in India were reading. So I had 3 research questions. Is there a difference in the learning outcome between these 2 courses, Nursing 340 and Nursing 460, if it's taught as a global classroom or if it's taught exclusively online? That was my first research question. My second research question is, there's a difference in student satisfaction? Like, do students prefer a global environment to a regular, exclusively online environment? And then the qualitative part of it was, what's the student experience with global classrooms? So these are all just, we have more sections than this that are taught in any given quarter, but I didn't think it was fair to look at other faculty data. This is just my data. So I hadn't asked the other faculty. It could all be de-identified, it could all be clustered, but it seemed like another layer of complexity that I was adding in. So this is just data from my classes. So one of the challenges that we've faced, you'll see in a second, is that the student outcome data is from these 2 very different courses. Nursing 340 students take relatively early in their career. Nursing 460, they take relatively late in their career. But pretty reasonably good numbers. They're not great numbers, but reasonably good. And the response rate, pretty equal. The numbers of students, fairly equal. So this is a little bit hard to see. Initially, my statistician, and I'm very grateful to the statisticians at CNHP, they broke out the learning outcomes of what do we expect students to learn, what do I say that I'm going to be teaching you in this course, and then how do you say, did you learn this, the course objectives, did you learn this compared to when you came into the class, did you know this, and then how much did you learn as a result of participating in this course. So when it was broken out, Nursing 340 course objectives are quite different from Nursing 460 course objectives. So my statistician said, let's just cluster them together and look at overall, did students learn what they came into the class expecting to learn? And they did. So they went up approximately 53% growth. This is out of a 5-point scale, as you guys probably know, because you also look at your course evaluations. So they said, coming out, a 5 would be perfect. I learned about 4.31 or 4.42. So there was growth, and growth was approximately equal. I was sad to see that they felt that they learned slightly more in the non-global classrooms, but my bias. This is maybe a little bit harder for you to read. I hope that you can. This looks at overall course satisfaction. Again, students in the non-global classroom were slightly higher than the students in the global classrooms, but not by not much, certainly not statistically significant. The way, I really wanted students in the global classroom to be ecstatically happy, and my students in the non-global classroom to be like, but I think we can look at that another way, is that like students overall are pretty satisfied with this course. There's not really a difference in the way they don't perceive a big difference. It's not a bad thing that I go to India to teach them. They like it pretty much just about the same. They learn about this, they learn pretty much the same thing, and overall, they're pretty satisfied with the way the course is set up and being run. So although I wanted to be there to be a big difference, and there wasn't, I was sad about that. I think I can look at it the other way of like, you know what, maybe the course is doing pretty well and just leave things be. So I'm just gonna let you read these. This is a sampling of the data. I got it from 3 separate places. Discussion boards, which of course would not be completely de-identified because I would know who the students were who entered the comments, so it's a possibility that students would say good things because it was my course. They know I love India, I'm very passionate about it. but I think that overall they were fairly honest. And then, of course, anonymous and, of course, evaluations. This one, I thought it was very interesting. Students in India chose not to read Curious Incident of Dog in the Nighttime. I asked my Drexel students about that, and they said a lot of them chose not to read it as well because they didn't like the writing, they didn't like the voice of the author. So, so that wasn't like unique just to India. So in terms of discussion, we've already talked about this. Students reported learning equally well in either setting. Students were overall pretty satisfied and felt that both courses met the objectives, particularly in terms of improving critical thinking, and they were applicable to their nursing practice, which for me is the most important thing. After this class, can they think about things? Can they think about things differently? And does it actually apply to what they're doing in their lives? And Drexel students wanted more interaction with Eternal University students and were frustrated by the time differences. I can't do much about that. But this is a picture of what the roads look like. I know, it's so beautiful. This is a road that I often go on a walk to someplace that I'll show you in another few minutes. This is a picture of the community-based research that we're doing. This is overlooking the farms and the villages where we're doing our research, and we take roads that look like that to get there. So the limitations, the data was a little bit noisy on the quantitative data in that it was a mixture of these two courses, 340 and 460. I think it would be better to compare just one course, like just compare 340 globally, 340 exclusively online. I didn't have enough numbers to be able to do that, so that's something we can look at going forward. Another way, ideally, would be that it'd be the same course, the same quarter, some students in a global format, some students in a non-global format, but my Drexel student, they balked at that. They said, heck no, and a notice went out to them several years ago, my first global course, and I thought it was just going to be just one section, my section, not the adjunct section. And when the students in the other section heard about it, no, that's not going to fly. We all want it to be a global classroom. So I can't really compare it that way. And then I think the other thing that would perhaps be more useful would be to integrate global classroom outcomes within this, when the class is being taught as a global classroom, but I'm not quite sure how it would be done because there are objectives just specific to that particular point in time. So I did that with discussion boards, like adding in specific discussion board questions. What did you learn? What did you think about? Any ideas for improvement with the global classrooms? So students' suggestions for improvement were the time zones. Can't fix that except to take students to India with me, which I'm working on, to encourage more. The students from Drexel said that they wanted students in India to be more engaged in the discussions. And I want them to be more engaged too. And they're most willing to do it when we're in the classroom. It's at hour 6 of their 8-hour day, and they're like bored and bleary-eyed. They just had lunch and they can't even think about something. And when I have to come up with something different to do, pull out your computers. Let's start writing to the folks at Drexel. Let's see what they've said. Let's engage with them. So they will do that when I'm there with them. But you have to remember, I'm just a visitor who's there for 6 weeks, and they have their own course of study and their own things that they're doing, and I'm additive. So it's difficult to get them to do it when we're not there with them. And then also the Drexel students suggested alternative ways of sharing other than just Zoom sessions, which they love, but because of the time differences, it can be difficult. So more discussion boards, more voice threads. Oops. Next steps are that we're going to continue the global classroom. So that little picture that I showed you of where I take my walks, it ends up going along this really beautiful mountain pathway, and this is a very typical little store, it's like a Wawa. That's a Himalayan Wawa. So we're going to continue to build our collaboration, integrate the student suggestions, continue our research, and continue to disseminate our findings. My team has been very successful having people welcome us to share what it is that we're doing. I'm very, very grateful for that. And this is a picture from the woman in the village along that same walk that I take. So, namaste. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. I was thinking, I guess my question is, when you start to look at outcomes between the global classroom, do you find that there's some disparities in terms of practical application of the learning? Because you're teaching same principles across cultures, they have access to the same curriculum, but the practices in one culture in terms of interaction with patients and things like that may be very different. So is it a novelty to be able to have access to this information, but when you go back to, for want of a better term, business as usual, how applicable is it to the real work that they do in their environment?
That's a fabulous question. My students at Drexel, I have a better sense of Drexel student nursing practice because nursing practice in the US, nursing practice in India is quite different. And I have a lot to learn about nursing practice in India, so I can't answer it so well from the India side. I can certainly answer it from the American nurse side. The Drexel students say that the global classroom makes a huge impact on their practice. They're willing to think about people from other cultures in different ways, particularly, let me see if I can get back to the Zoom picture. They love the interactions with the students from India. There are a lot of healthcare providers that migrate from India, Pakistan, to the U.S. to practice, either within their same profession or perhaps at a different level within the profession. So doctors who come over from India, as an example, it may be difficult to pass licensing exams in India with their India. The licensing is different. So it may be difficult for them to practice as a physician in the U.S., so instead they practice as a nursing assistant, or nurses may practice as a tech of some sort. So, or they might be a doctor in India, come over here, pass the same licensing exam as other American physicians, and now be practicing as a physician. Still, their mindset, their language, their practices are going to be a little bit different because they're based on where they grew up and where their initial medical education was. So there are sometimes differences in the practice, which American nurses sometimes find challenging. And what the nurses have told me is that after having more personalized interactions with people from other countries, specifically India, because that's where I go, that they have a greater understanding of patients who come to them, whether it's patients who are there as migrants, and there are a lot of, as we all know, there are a lot of migrants in the U.S., so migrants who show up in the emergency room, we don't necessarily know, we as nurses, American nurses, don't necessarily know or have the time to ask or understand what their backstory is, what brought them here. So my Drexel students tell me that they're provided a little bit of insight into the lives of people from other countries, and they find that very useful. But certainly it'd be great if they had more. So I think I don't know how to measure that as a learning outcome, other than stuff that students tell me. But it'd be a great question.
I think this is maybe more a comment, but speaks to what you're saying. I'm thinking that your quantitative results are disappointing because or not disappointing, but not showing what you wanted to show, because of the limitations of learning outcomes. And I think we've had such a focus on them for the last 10 years or so, and they're great. They do lots of great things. They help us focus what we're teaching. But I wonder if, in fact, the study really is showing you that it's a different question to be asked.
Absolutely.
And-
I agree. No, I completely agree, and I wish that I could. I don't know a way to embed, because the same course is offered year-round, and the learning outcomes are tied to the course, unless I had like a whole separate course that went through Senate and everything that's involved in that, to be just only offered exclusively as a global classroom, then I could embed in global classroom learning outcomes, and I can't really do that. So the way I've gotten around that is by asking through a discussion board afterwards. But that would be a really great thing to do. I'd love a solution for that one. Dana? But I agree with you. I think it's not really measuring global classroom outcomes. It's measuring learning outcomes for that class.
Or even that it's not the wrong set of outcomes, but the outcomes themselves we should have a more kind of evolving attitude towards, right?
Yeah.
Because learning is unfolding and we don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
I think looking at your data and knowing a little bit about what your courses are like, right, and the course outcomes that you traditionally get, I think you're a victim of your own success.
Pardon?
You've got really well-developed, well-designed courses that really speak to the students and their outcomes and having them meet their objectives in the courses. So I agree with what was just being said. You're not asking the right questions, but how to differentiate from students who don't have that experience. They're not going to be able to articulate what it's like not to have that experience because they've never had that experience.
Right.
You're only going to be able to get that information from students who have had the experience in that class. But I do think it's traditionally the outcomes you get from your course, correct?
Right.
Right, from
Right.
learning outcomes.
There might be something to be said for working with global classrooms too, and finding out if there is a way to administer just to the global classrooms community something across courses.
They do. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Deidre. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
But they do. Adam Zan, Office of International Programs, does send out a survey to all students who are enrolled in a global classroom to ask them about their experiences in the global classroom. So that would be something else I could look at. You're right.
But it might also be a way to make it more like, not that I ever encourage this, more like APHIS, but there might be a way to have it be less anecdotal and more quantitative, and that would be another way of capturing data.
Dana's thinking.
I am.
Click, click,
Is
click,
there
click,
a particular? I think you need to think about: is there a particular assignment where you see more engagement or more understanding when they're in the global classroom, and look at the outcomes based in that? So, same assignment across courses, but is there something that you're doing that you think you're seeing more engagement, more learning happening, and only you could answer that? Because you're in the course all the time. But I think that may be something that you may want to look at. Is there some particular artifact in that course that you see as richer and deeper in their understanding and their engagement when they're with the students in India versus when they're not?
That's a great
But
question.
only you can answer that question.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So again, thank you to our presenters today for sharing the exciting research. Can we give them another round of applause? This particular town hall, the purpose is for us to come together to connect across disciplines. So our next town hall will start in 2020. So if you're out there and you want to do this type of research, reach out to other schools and see what research other schools and colleges are doing, and come together to connect. As you know, we heard from Dr. Ryan, it's all about the global classroom. So that global classroom, that philosophy needs to be brought into drugs and reaching out to other colleges and universities to see what they're doing as far as research, to connect that research together. Couple of housekeeping items that I'm to remind you of. Please review and attend the professional development opportunities. There's a flyer outside that's on the table. There are 3 available opportunities for you to attend. Essentials for online teaching, applying the quality matters rubrics, and advanced pedagogy and instructional designs. Again, you can visit the Inspire website for more details. Our last town hall for the academic year, we scheduled for May 21st. It'll be a Zoom town hall, and it'll be scheduled for the OLC committee year-end reports that will be due. Dr. Ard just indicated she'll be sending out some information in the coming weeks regarding assignments and information that's due for that. Thank you for our events team and our tech team for setting up this event today and for all your support. This concludes our town hall for today. Do we have any final questions before we leave? If not, thank you all.
Thank you.